welcome to the Bleeding Hearts Club, where we alchemize pain into something beautiful together. I'm your co-host Shroot, and I'm an astrologer who uses astrology as a self-reflective tool for growth and healing. And this is my co-host. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, y'all. I'm Stevie. I use they and she pronouns. I am a tarot reader, spiritual practitioner. What am I? Death worker, therapist, and just a pal.
Love you, pal.
Love you.
I'm so excited for today's episode. We have an awesome session about ancestors today for you. But first, we have some exciting news. It's Libra season. It's our birthdays. Woo! As Stevie's been saying today, this is 30. We are turning 30. Stevie is already 30, and I will be 30 on the 21st, which is mind-blowing to us. Two little Rugrats who definitely did not expect to be here. But we're really happy we are. And I think as we move to this next phase in our lives of, the Saturn return culminating, we're winding down. We have one more year left to go. And this transition of us moving from young adult to just straight up adult, no more prefixes. We're not young anymore, we're grown. I think it's a really good time for both of us to reflect on ancestors and our relationship to our ancestors, because I think that as we'll talk about, in the horoscope section, but a really important kind of piece that goes hand in hand with ancestors is gratitude. And I feel really grateful to be here. I definitely never thought that I didn't expect to live past 21. I was very unwell for most of my mental health was not great when I was a teenager. And every year since 21 and every year after has always felt like a celebration to me of like, I'm it's an achievement of like, I live, bitch. So I'm super happy to celebrate that with y'all. Do you have any thoughts on this is 30?
My goodness. I was talking to my best friend, Stephanie, and we were talking. She's already 30. I just turned 30 as of yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. And I was just thinking about how important the movie 13 going on 30 was for me as a child, um because that 30 flirty and thriving mantra was just everything to me. And I think as I got through my 20s and all the chaos of my 20s, I was always kind of holding on to 30, 30, flirty, thriving, like 30. It just felt like it was going to be different. So I'm really happy I'm here. And I think I'm also just really happy to be getting older. It's such a privilege and something that I look forward to now. I know, I'm sure some parts of me were like 30. Oh no, like it's here, but like it's here. And I'm really excited. And I'm excited to get older. I'm excited to become an elder. I'm excited to become an ancestor. So, but not too excited. Like I'm not in a rush to get there. So I feel very grateful to be in a mindset where I want to be present for this aging process. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna leave that there.
I feel exactly the same way. It's just such a blessing. I just feel so freaking blessed to be here. It's like I'm still in disbelief. I thought, every year after 21, it's like, how many years can you still be in disbelief? And it's like, I'm still there. I'm still in
Yeah.
disbelief. And I hope to hold that magic within me as I keep getting older, because this aging thing is so dang cool. It's very Saturnian. But even as a child, I remember when, we were new on the internet. It was like the 2000s, early 2000s. And I was in like, first, second grade messing around on the computer. And whenever you like had to sign up for an account on a website, you had to put your birthday in there, right? And we were always lying about our birthday to be on the internet. And I remember dreaming of the day that I had to scroll back super far on the year thing to like not be lying about my birthday, like to actually like be that old. And it was almost like a manifestation exercise. I used to dream about, as I was scrolling, to get to whatever fake year I wanted to use. Like, I was like, one day this is going to be me for real. I won't have to lie. I'm like going to have to scroll back mad far because I'm old. Like, and to me, like, that was the dream. Like, I was really looking at that as like an achievement. And like now that I have to scroll back mad far, and now that we've had like the two Y2K resurgence, and we're officially at the age where it's like things are coming back, and we're old now. Like the fact that people are in their 20s who were born in the 2000s is like, what? Like that's crazy. So the fact that the kids call us like last century is like hilarious. Like because we were like, oh, 90s kids, 90s kids. And now they're like, yeah, bitch, you old. I love that. It's just like so, it makes me feel really happy. And I think it makes my inner child like really happy because I hated being a kid. Like I was acutely aware of how oppressed we are as children. And I was like, this is not going to be my problem when I'm grown. Like my future is in my destiny is in my hands when I'm grown. Like I'm taking the bull by the horns. Like, so I know that, my inner child would be super proud of, where I'm at. And my inner child would be very confused at how we got here. And my inner child has no concept of disability, so my inner child is really frustrated about that. But and just has no registration of the fact that I'm disabled, which is not fun. Very incongruent with my reality. But um, like I know my inner child is proud that we freaked it and we got here, despite all of the obstacles in my way and all of the reasons that I had to not take my life into my own hands and freak it. So that's what I'm celebrating. At 30 is I freaked it and we're here. Like so yeah, so we wanted to start with that. Wish us happy birthday. We're Libras, we love to celebrate. We've been celebrating all month. We will continue to celebrate all month. We are Scorpio dominant Libras, so you know that we will keep the party going even into Scorpio season. We are both Scorpio Venuses, so that's like also our time. So we encourage you to celebrate with us. We are Libras. We don't like to celebrate alone. So, imbibe a little bit of celebratory energy into your life this month, in our honor. We would love that. So, thank you.
Oh my
Anyway,
gosh. I'm
yeah.
just thinking about like all the Libra memes. There's one I need to find, but it's like Libra on their birthday, and it's just a person sitting by themselves, like crying.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Literally
So
any birthday I've ever had to like celebrate alone, because like a lot of times our birthdays during midterms and stuff. So it was like, you know, people couldn't make it, or like I know one year I was all my friends didn't live in the same city as me and I had midterm, so I couldn't go travel for my birthday. I went to the beach and I was just so emo. I was like, this is my birthday. Bye, love me. It'll be okay. But like literally that meme, like
me every year,
it's
even
so
if people are
loud.
around.
Yeah. It's so loud. I love
I'll
that.
find it.
Yeah. But okay, we wanted to talk about ancestors today, and I'm really excited about this topic because I have had a very tumultuous journey with my ancestors and with my relationship to my ancestors from a spiritual standpoint. So I really want to unpack that. But first, I think it's really important to kind of set the stage and understand why this season in particular is so relevant in terms of ancestor relationships and why it's a good season to be thinking about your relationship to your ancestors. So, there's a lot of cultural resonance around the world. We're going to focus on our cultures, because that's where we can speak best from. But that, fall and this transition into winter is a time where, and especially Northern Hemisphere for what that's worth. But we're transitioning into like winter and we're transitioning into the world kind of getting that kind of quiet, like wound down phase where, um much more introspective, that kind of hibernation energy, even though obviously we're all working our butts off, we're not actually hibernating, but that, we don't leave the house as much because it's cold, it's rainy, like there's a level of introspection that goes up during winter, and it just becomes easier in that transition between um, summer and winter, like that fall transition. We call it the veil is thin, like the ability to connect with entities that are not human and are not living on this earth in flesh sacks, if you will, the ability to connect with them is a little bit stronger during that transition between fall and winter. And so there are a lot of cultural um, celebrations that coincide with this period of time that honor the passing of loved ones or honor death itself. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. So I'll start with, in Hinduism, and, Hinduism has a broad span, there's no one united idea of Hinduism. And so I'm speaking from, a Northern Indian upper caste standpoint of what I was raised in, but we have a holiday called Pitra Paksh, the mouthful. And it is specifically about, it is a 2-week period, which actually coincides with eclipse season. It just wrapped up on the 2nd. And it is about venerating your patriarchal ancestors, your forefathers, essentially. And, you know, I don't talk about it too much on this podcast, but I have a lot of issues with the norms that have been passed down through upper caste Hindu legions of thought. I don't know how to say that, but like the kind of philosophies that have been passed down from family to family, they are like deeply patriarchal, deeply oppressive, deeply, unfair. And, I think that this holiday is an example of that, where, we don't really have the same level of respect for mothers and women and our female ancestors in the way that we do our male ones. So I have a lot of connection and knowledge about my male ancestors, but I don't have that about my female ancestors. And it's kind of something I've always been super mad about. And so I'll talk about my, tumultuous relationship with my culture and its relationship to ancestors a little bit later, but I'd love to hear Stevie's perspective.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Mexican and Filipino, second gen. Okay. Both on November 1st and November 2nd, there are Mexican and Filipino holidays that like focus on celebrating people who have passed. Of course, there's Dia de los Muertos, and then in the Philippines, it's called Undas, and Undas is like, I don't know if it's like the same as All Saints Day or whatever it is, but both of them are focused on celebrating the people who have passed on, whether it's building an altar and putting everyone's pictures up, putting offerings on the altar, like food, snacks, sweets, flowers, water, tequila, like anything, beer. I have so many things on the altar. Yeah, and just kind of remembering and celebrating those people, and even remembering and celebrating people that maybe you haven't met in this lifetime, but you still have the pictures from your parents or your grandparents, and these are just things that get passed on. So yeah, I think these are really beautiful holidays in the Philippines and in Mexico. I think a lot of people will go to the cemeteries, especially in the Philippines. Like in the Philippines, people are like traveling in mass, just flooding the cemeteries, having parties, and it really is such a beautiful way. Like both of these are just such really beautiful ways to celebrate our ancestors. And I feel like people sometimes think ancestors, they're like distant, far off relatives, when they can really just be like your pet who died. Um, or, the people that you knew in this lifetime. They're not far away. And I feel like that's another like core thing to remember, that your ancestors can be anyone and anything, and you don't even have to be directly related to them. And yeah, these are just beautiful things that I love. I didn't get to celebrate these. Like, that's just, we'll talk about it in a minute, but that's just a part of sometimes being a child of diaspora. You don't get to practice or celebrate certain traditions, but you can reconnect to them. And yeah. So yeah, there's that. Mexico, Philippines. And I'm curious to anyone who's listening, yeah, what holidays do you celebrate? Are there any like traditions, celebrations, customs, anything that comes to mind, that you do, that your culture does, that your families do to honor and celebrate people who have passed on? let us know. I want to know. I want to know everything.
Yeah. Feel free to comment on our Instagram or email us at bleedingheartsclub.pod@gmail.com because we would love to hear about it. We are really passionate about um, the kind of interconnectivity between cultures and the kind of same conclusions that people from all over the world have kind of drawn and the stories that they kind of have to explain that. I think it's really cool to um, learn about stuff like that. So we're super interested. We'd love to know from you what your relationship to that kind of thing is. And of course, living in America, we don't really have a relationship to it. Like I was seeing a conversation, I want to say it was Twitter, I can't remember for sure, but about how in this country we don't really have like space to grieve in public. And we don't really have space to mourn in public. And it's kind of a really isolating experience to go through grief and loss. And I was a little bit shocked to think about that. I think I had never really thought about that because my experience with grief is that my family is based in India and, I became an astrologer as a way to process my grief of losing my grandfathers in the same year, coinciding with Uranus's ingress from Aries to Taurus and then back into Aries again in 2018. And I literally like Aries moved in, no, Uranus moved into Aries. No, oh my gosh. Uranus moved from Aries to Taurus in spring-ish of 2018. And my grandfather passed away, who I have a very, very close connection to. And then in like fall winter of 2018, Uranus retrograded from Taurus to Aries, and my other grandfather passed away. And both times I was in the middle of exams. I couldn't leave. And both times my parents went to India, and all of the kind of cousins who are, abroad, we weren't able to go pay our respects, and we weren't able to be a part of the grieving process. And, I was surrounded by people who were not on that same page as me. Luckily, we have to mention Andrew every episode, our bestie Andrew. I guess luckily maybe is not the right word, but he lost his grandfather at the same time that I did. It was like within days of each other, which was super wild. And we lived together at the time. So um like we did kind of get to experience that together. And that was really wild. But it was still like I felt so far away from my family and I felt so far away. Like I knew that I needed to do things to make the grief real because it was not feeling real at all. And I knew that if I didn't process it as it was happening, that it was going to cause problems for me down the line because it was such a big energetic shift. And so I just like, I wanted to acknowledge that, in America, we don't really have strong spaces where we can, process our grief. Some people do have families that do have, practices and rituals and they are able to hold that together. But I just wanted to say, if you don't have that and you've experienced this kind of grieving by yourself, I hold space for you. I can relate. And I think both of us know how hard that is, to feel so far away from the loved ones that we lose. And that is, I think, another example of, both America having a hard time with this concept of ancestors and loss, but then also of the diasporic experience of being so far away and losing ones we love. So we hold space, sending you love. We know that's difficult.
Another holiday that celebrates, uplifts, and honors people who have died, um, that I want to bring in is Trans Day of Remembrance. That's typically held on November 20th. It's an international holiday and it's used to observe just memorializing trans folks who have died, been murdered, as a result of transphobia. And yeah, it's such a heavy topic. And I think it's speaking to some of the things that Shroot was saying about like, we don't get to mourn in public. And I feel like having this day is a day that we do, like, we're intentionally mourning in public. I mean, we're constantly mourning. Like, people are being killed and brutalized, every day. It feels like every day I see somebody in a memorial post, in a mutual aid post of, yeah, and it's really hard, but I feel like it really insulates within the trans and queer community. And on November 20th, like it's a public mourning, it's a public memorial where everybody gets to see, even though they should, every day. But yeah, I wanted to bring that in.
Yeah, I think I really love the Trans Day of Remembrance because I think that it is a response to those lack of spaces, like you had mentioned. And I think that it is, the trans community saying, you thought you could erase us, but you can't. We're here. And, we honor our trans ancestors and we honor our trans siblings who, um, weren't able to be here because of this screwed up world that we live in. And I think that there's such a powerful, energetic, like resonance that comes from venerating, the dead. There is a reason that so many people and so many cultures around the world for centuries have done it. Because um, it is part of how we stay alive, is through, venerating those who aren't here anymore. And it is part of how we keep our lineages alive. It's how stories get passed down from our ancestry. And I think that trans people keeping the stories and the hearts and the spirits of our sisters and siblings and brothers and all those who have been harmed and died from um, violence. It's like really energetically powerful to be able to assert, like, we're here, we're queer, we're not going anywhere. And if you try to make us go somewhere, we're keeping them alive too. They're still here with us. And yeah, I feel really emotional around Trans Day of Remembrance, because I think that being trans, like, we're speaking from experience, by the way, like, um, being non-binary and being gender fluid and trans, like, it is a hard thing to experience coming to terms with by yourself. And I think that especially as like a South Asian, American person who I don't have community that I grew up with that relates to this experience. And the visibility around transness that I saw growing up was white. It wasn't from my community. And of course I, grew to learn that there was trans visibility in my community, but there wasn't actually a lot of trans men visibility at all. In fact, I've only really seen it since I got on TikTok. I'm like, the For You page said for you. And that's been amazing. But um, Trans Day of Remembrance was one of the first things that really spoke to me, and it made me feel like, oh, like this is for me. Like, and that I feel kinship with, the people who are honored on this holiday, and that it is something that I want to participate in and I want to celebrate. And so um it's always been really important to me to hold space on that holiday. And I think I want to amp up my practice this year. I'm finally in a lot more settled place that I think I'm gonna, properly light candles. I'm gonna do a little bit of a ritual, because I just feel so passionately that um, we keep each other alive, and that, you know, we honor that memory and respect to those we weren't able to keep alive. So thanks for bringing that up, pal. I really love that holiday. It makes me very emotional, like in a good way, but like it just very like seen, very just like held in community in a way that I have not felt around ancestor worship or veneration before this. So um yeah, I think let's talk a little bit about what to do if your ancestors, you don't have a good relationship with them, or you didn't grow up in a practice around ancestor veneration, or you're curious, but you don't really know where to begin. So I first wanted to name that, like, if you're kind of interested in spirituality, which I assume if you're listening to this podcast, you are, if you've made it this far with us, like, it is a pretty common thing that like ancestor worship or ancestor veneration is an integral part of spiritual practices. And that you likely have come up, come across, people talking about it, people showing you how they do it, et cetera, et cetera. And I really just want to start with, you don't have to do it. Like, you don't have to venerate your ancestors. You don't have to worship your ancestors. You don't have to honor your ancestors. And I really like what Stevie had said about your ancestors aren't necessarily literally the people you are descended from. I loved what you said about it could be a pet, because I do think that a lot of people, especially Americans, um, don't necessarily have a positive relationship with their ancestors, but they definitely have a positive relationship with a pet from their childhood. I know that I have friends who dream of their pets that, their childhood pets that passed away, and that is an ancestor coming to visit you. So I think, yeah, definitely like expanding your perception on who is considered an ancestor and who is your ancestor that you connect with, and understanding that just because somebody is literally your ancestor doesn't mean that you have to connect with them as such. That is completely optional. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience because I think it's funny. I always kind of give it in my readings as like a hey, like PSA, this is what not to do when beginning ancestor worship for the first time with no like a DIY experience with no cultural, initiation, is that like, I wanted to connect with my ancestors because I had never felt connected to them. And I wasn't sure if that was partially because I'm so far away. And all of my ancestors, literally all of them are from India, unless we have a rogue, you know, Persian or British somebody in there. Which probably not great. But to be fair, I don't think any of my lineage is great. There has not been a single, at least to my knowledge, love marriage before me. It's all been arranged. So, it's all under that patriarchal context. So those are kind of reasons why I've never really felt connected to my ancestors, and I've never really like my upbringing as a South Asian person was so repressive, and it was so limiting on my identity just because I was born a quote unquote girl. And I always felt resentful toward that. And I felt resentful to the people that perpetuated this way of thinking. Whether they had a choice or not was not something I really cared about. I was just angry. And so I never really had a relationship to ancestor veneration. And then I moved out on my own in 2020. I moved across the country and I was living completely by myself. The pandemic hit, like it was a whole thing. And I was like, I need to feel a little bit rooted. Like I need to feel a little bit more connected to where I come from because I'm feeling super unrooted right now. And so what's the word? I decided, I was like, okay, I'm going to do some ancestor veneration. So I put on like a guided meditation to connect with your ancestors on YouTube, and I had all my little crystals set up, and I had made an altar dedicated to my ancestors, and I had put crystals and offerings and all these things. I had some postcards from the 13th press or Marigold tarot deck that we always rave about. Whenever you buy something from the shop, they come with postcards, and of little mini prints of and I feel a ancestral resonance with that deck. And so I put those up on my altar to represent my ancestors. And so I did this meditation. It was lovely. I've had a wonderful time with ancestor meditations on YouTube. So I was like, okay, like this was awesome. And I woke up and I felt so like I like welcomed in connection with my ancestors. And I woke up feeling so kind of like serene, like floating. I felt like I was floating. It was really weird, but it was like a good weird. And I was like, okay, like I did that. That was great. That was awesome. Like I gotta go to the gas station for some eggs. And so I went and walked over to the gas station, and I wore my house slippers to the gas station, which I never do. Like those are house slippers. But I was like kind of out of it. Like, so I realized it only once I got there. I was like, wait a minute. Oops. And then as I was in the gas station, I was literally just getting eggs, and which I think is so cool that they had eggs in the gas station in Houston. I've never seen that anywhere else, but it was awesome. And so there was just some voice in my head where just like I had this feeling. I was like, I should get some alcohol. And like I'm not really a drinker. Like I'm too chronically ill to be dealing with alcohol. And so I rarely drink. I drink like maybe twice a year or something like that. But it was around my birthday, I think, and I was like, okay, like I'll get some alcohol. So I went and got White Claws because that's the only drink I can drink at a gas station with my food sensitivities. And I came back home and I was like, I need to put some alcohol on my altar. And I was like, oh, this must be my ancestors. How fun. Like, and so I put it on my altar. I cracked it open, put it on my altar, and I was like, wow, I'm connecting with my ancestors. How cool. I feel it. I feel so connected. La la la. And then the next day, it was like more alcohol. And I was like, okay, like I can do that. More alcohol. So I replaced it. And then the next day it was more alcohol. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, hold on. Like, I didn't specify which ancestors I wanted to call in. And I, of course, do have, alcoholism of my lineage. And, that is a big kind of problem that has been in my family. And I think it's one of the reasons why the family that I know is not really, they don't really drink like that. And so that was kind of a family story that had been told to us of like, for example, all the weddings in my family are dry on both sides of the family, which is kind of wild. That literally it's a norm in our family that weddings are dry. So it's like I've always known the story of like, oh yeah, we live this way because there are many people in our family who did not. And we've seen the consequences of that, and therefore we are choosing to live this way. That was kind of how it had been framed to me. And I was like, oh, I'm feeding ancestors that to a certain extent are written out of our story because, there's a level of shame associated with them. And I was like, okay, well, I honor your experience, ancestors who, are alcoholic, but that's not necessarily the vibe that I'm trying to cultivate in my own journey in my life right now. That's not really a connection that I want to nurture. So then I realized, okay, I need to be really specific about what ancestors I'm calling in. And so I encourage anybody who wants to do ancestor work. I've given you examples of like setting up an altar, doing meditation. These are different ways that you can connect with your ancestors. But when you're connecting and when you're calling them in, your intention when you're setting up the altar, when you're setting up the YouTube meditation to do, like you want to make sure you're calling in ancestors that are in alignment with your highest good. Benevolent ancestors in alignment with your highest good. Because I also was experiencing like a lot of judgment from my ancestors. Because again, I wasn't calling in like this specific type of ancestor where that patriarchal judgments type stuff. So like I don't feel understood by my ancestors, even like benevolent ones that I call in. Like I don't necessarily feel a deep connection with my ancestors because I just feel like the way that I approach my relationship to my literal ancestors is that I am everything that they either were not or were not allowed to be. And so I wear that lack of connection, that lack of conformity with it, like as a badge of honor to me. It's like a point of pride to me that it's like I am not like my ancestors, and that is like a win for us. Like that I get to be me, like that's such a win for me. And people always say, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. It's like, oh, I am not. I am not that. Oh boy, am I not that. But that to me is like a dream come true because like I get to be me. And I think that's such a blessing. So that's kind of how I approach the ancestor thing. I like to be really specific about who I'm calling in. I also acknowledge that the connection is not that deep, and that's okay. And that it is a blessing that it's not that deep because I needed to be so far removed from the systems and the cycles and the patterns that were passed down, through my lineage. I needed to be so far away from all of that in order to fully be me. And that's okay. So, yeah, that was a little bit long, but hopefully that was helpful. I'd love to know what you think. If you can relate, let me know.
Whoa, taking it all in, taking it all in. Dogs barking outside.
I hear
They're
him.
also taking it all in.
They
They're
said we have ancestors too.
It's true. I was actually just talking to my mom today about my two dogs that I grew up with, Spike and Tai Tai. Shout out to them.
Yeah,
They
rest in peace.
lived, yeah, my angels. They both lived until like really just shy of 17 years old. I had them
Wow.
for so long. But I always imagine them. Tai Tai, he shows up in my parents' house a lot. Um, as showing up as the scent of pee in the kitchen or the dining area. Yep. It happens.
He was such
I
a cheeky little guy.
yeah, he was a little rascal. Um, but yeah, I think of them all the time as like my little ancestors. Like I know they're gonna meet me at the gates. And I was talking to my mom today about how I think Spike, he was the brown dog, I think he is a Filipino witch dog, also called a spin. And they're the dogs who kind of greet you and help you on your journey to, the underworld, the different realms. And then Tai Tai, he was a black dog, and I think he is a Xolo Squintly, which is an indigenous Mexican dog, hairless, so cute, so funny, who also, you know, help you on your journey after you die. So I think in terms of thinking about like different ways that ancestors can take shape, like you've probably already met them. And maybe, there's a lot to say about feeling disconnected from your ancestors as a way of like disconnecting from trauma, like intergenerational trauma, violence, and all of those things. And yeah, that's fair. And we'll make time for that in the times that we get together. Um, but if you don't feel called to venerate or connect with like literal people, yeah, it can be animals. It could be plants. We also use the word plant cesters because the trees have been here for a hot minute. They're there for you. Or like different flowers or herbs or spices that like maybe your ancestors used that you can still use, but in your own way. You build your own personal relationships with plants, animals, bugs, seasons. Um, they're also like, if you don't want to venerate to your ancestors, boy, do I have a list of deities for you. Like in every culture, I feel there is a deity for death, for the underworld. In Mexico, there's La Santísima Muerte, Most Holy Death. Um, there's so many in Greek mythology. I can't even name them. There's so many. I mean, I can name them, but you know, there's just, yeah. So I'm curious too. And I guess it doesn't have to be death. I'm just focused on death constantly.
Yeah,
Um,
big Scorpio mood over here.
yeah, big Scorpio. But they're also, yeah, there's Hecate, there's Lilith, there's, um,
I would be careful with Lilith.
oh
We
yeah,
talked about that in the previous episode, so just take all of those caveats as well. But
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. There's everyone.
Mhm.
There's something for everyone. Shroot, do any come to mind for you specifically? Not necessarily death, but
Yeah.
just deities that people
Yeah.
build relationships.
I love being in a relationship with deities because I feel like that was something that felt super personal. And even though, yes, in my culture, in Hinduism, your family has certain deities that they are gravitated to and they have a lineage of worshiping. But I always felt a really strong connection to Kali Ma and Shiva as well. They're kind of the same side, two sides of the same coin kind of thing, where Shiva is represented in Hinduism as the facilitator of like transmuting death or transmuting the end of the life stage for any living thing in the universe into the fertilizer for rebirth, for creation. So Shiva is the one who, or the energy that represents the metabolization of the old, of the dead, of the stuff that needs to be excised because it's not working anymore. And I always connected with him as a child. And Kalima is very much like about like vanquishing that which, is not about it. Like she wears a chain of skulls of men around her neck. And there's a lot of layers to the symbolism there. It's not just like an F the patriarchy moment. But it's just this idea that like she is like a warrior or like a protector of like our souls. And their kind of combination, like Shiva is called like the dance of destruction. So he's known for dance and like the idea that like dance, like actually humans dancing can create like an energetic cleanse and refresh, and you can kind of transmute yourself into something new via dancing and singing together. And like if we think about cultures around drumming and cultures around using drums as a way to vibrate out things that are stuck in our body, like that's kind of what Shiva represents. He's representing that, the drums and the footwork and the dancing of like creating space to be birthed anew. And so I've always connected really, really heavily with that as a child. I actually have the Drifula. It's a trident, a brass trident. I keep it on my desk. As an astrologer, I've always had it there since I started my practice, and I invoke that Shiva energy as a part of my astrology practice, where I create that space for us to vibrate into something anew, to be able to, withdraw and burn down what is no longer of us anymore, and to create that fertile ground to birth anew. So that's like something that I've integrated into just about every aspect of my life. And that came from being a child and being really resentful of just about every other aspect of my culture that was like put on me. I was like, I don't like any of this stuff, but Shiva's kind of cool. And oh, I discovered Kali Ma at an older age because that wasn't something that my family had worshipped. Um, and she's using the fear tactic that a lot of moms will use to discipline their kids. They're like, I'm sending Kali Ma after you because she's very scary looking. She's got like her tongue out, she's got the skulls, like, you know, um, so that was like I didn't have a connection to her, but as I kind of got older and I explored on my own, I realized I was like, oh no, no, yeah, like I feel a deep connection to that warrior spirit and that ruthlessness by which you can cut out the cycles and the habits and the patterns that are just not of you. And so I don't know if it's like literal death related. It's a little bit more of like an ego death, a spiritual death. And the idea that like in order for rebirth to happen, and that's in Hinduism, we call that Brahma. He's the creator. And I got beef with Brahma, but that's more issue with the religion than it is with the idea of, creation itself. I don't have beef with creation. I mean, I didn't want to be born. I wasn't pleased to be here. So I do a little bit of beef with creation just on that front. But that's more like existential teen angst than it is anything actually tangible. But like in order for creation to happen, like you need to create space. And I just really resonate. It's the Scorpio in me. I really resonate with that space to create it. So
Wow.
I love this topic. We could talk about this for freaking ever.
Mhm.
So feel free to
Ew.
ask us any questions. We're happy to touch on it later. We will be stay tuned for the next episode. It will be answering, our audience questions around ancestor relationships. So we've already filmed it, but feel free to send us in any other questions for a future episode because we'll definitely circle back to this topic.
Yay.
Yay.
I want to know. I
Yeah.
really do.
Is it horoscope time?
I think so.
Yay. So let's get into the horoscope. I wanted to start a little bit out of ordinary, but I wanted to start with the astrology this time because we do have some interesting transits that are happening this month. There is a lot of Venus activation. She is busy. She's booked and busy. And she's in Sagittarius. So there is kind of this feeling of like relationship wise, you got to get up and go, like she's moving into Sagittarius on the 17th. And that transition from Scorpio to Sagittarius, it's really a good time to think about like, off the back of what we were talking about with Shiva and Kali, like, what isn't serving you in your relationships anymore? What dynamics in your relationships have changed? Has there been any kind of sudden disruption? Is it happening right now, around October 15th? Or has there been any you were kind of reeling from if you're listening on a different date? Like any kind of sudden shocks to your relationship that have really rocked your perception of the norms and the way things that are. I think that a lot of times, especially if you have fixed placements, so that would be Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, why am I blanking? Leo. For some reason, I always blank on those. But if you have fixed placements, then you can get really comfortable in your relationships and you can think of your relationships as kind of a stagnant thing. And I really want to encourage you, Libra energy, Venus energy is all about flux. And relationships are inherently dynamic and they're inherently things that we construct. And we construct them with our actions, we construct them with our intentions. And so this is a really good season, especially as we transition into Scorpio season, to be thinking about like, what is the direction you're heading in your relationships with the way that you are acting in them. You know, what are you building? Where are you going? Like, where is this relationship going? And I don't mean that in like the roadmap to marriage, and I don't mean that only in a romantic context, because relationships exist in so many different realms. And I actually really encourage embracing all different types of relationships, you know, relationship to your librarian, you know, relationship to the person you who checks you out at the grocery store. Like, you know, when I say where is this relationship going, I mean like what is like your investment in the shared humanity between you and the people that you are in connection with throughout your life? And this isn't even limited to people, right? We talked about pets a lot in this episode. It could be the animals that are outside. There's a lizard that hangs out on our house and he just pops over on each window. So we all get to kind of see him. And every time I see him, I'm always on like a work call or like in a reading. And no, thankfully not in a reading because I do that here, but if I'm in bed, like on a work call and I have my window open and the lizard shows up, like my attention span is gone. Like I can't be productive. I'm geeking out about this like adorable lizard. Um, and it's like every home I've lived in Florida, like a lizard will show up on like either the back patio or the windows, and it just makes me so happy. So it's like, you know, being in connection with all these kind of beings that exist around us. And I think that can tie into even like our ancestors and the fact that we have kind of like non-human entities that you can't see or perceive in the material world, but do very much exist and are very much real to you, like that way that I called in my ancestors that I had talked about before, how that suddenly became very real to me, even if I obviously couldn't see anything. Um, like, where are you going with all of those relationships? So this is a really good month to be intentional, to set intentions around, you know, what do you want out of these relationships? How do you want to show up? And what actions can you take to build that reality, you know? And is there communication that you can have that can support that and to get on the same page with the people that you feel close to and want to have that kind of conversation with? So I wanted to open with that because I think that that's probably the most important thing to keep in mind during this Libra Scorpio season. And I hope it's a good time. I hope you're having fun because hopefully, you know, Libra season, maybe we're biased, but it's always supposed to be a little bit of a good time. You know, it's a very social, busy. I always, whenever I do year ahead readings, I'm like, you're gonna be social, you're gonna be real busy. And that's regardless of what people's charts are. It just seems to always line up that way. So if you're being social and busy, you know, hope you're having a good time. Try to be present, try to enjoy, and try to ask yourself, what am I getting out of this? And what is this building? What is this, you know, moving toward? And if you're feeling isolated, if you're feeling lonely, if you're what we talked about with the meme of us on our birthday alone crying, you know, how can you be in community with yourself? And how can you like be intentional about the way that you're in community with yourself. So I can give an example really quick of one of the ways that I've been in community with myself whenever I feel like, oh, I'm alone, da, 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 I get existential, is that I like to be in a spiritual relationship with my hands because, you know, our hands are kind of a big tool that we need to do anything. And I think about how so much of my creative output, yes, it comes from my mind, but the thing that translates it to others is my hands because that's what uses my computer, my phone, whatever. Um, and so I like to have a ritual. This is very Venusian and you know, body related, beauty related rituals are always that's why I think we got a little extra dressed up for Libra season, you know. Beauty related rituals are always a great way to connect with yourself and to connect spiritually with yourself. But I like to take a hand cream and I like to give myself a hand massage while listening to, you know, a podcast about beauty or listen to a playlist that makes me feel super hot. And I just like to really like be present for feeling my hands and being in relationship to my hands and expressing that gratitude and just feeling really, you know, smelling how good the hand cream smells, like being just really in that moment. I think there's a lot of benefit that is very underrated to beauty rituals like that. And so be intentional about your relationship to yourself and being in community with yourself. And don't let it be like an accident or a habitual thing. Like be in really active practice this month. So that's what I would say. What are your thoughts, Stevie?
I love the ritual.
It's so
That
fun.
sounds, yeah, I love that so much. I when you brought up hands, I was thinking about the same thing, but with feet. Like
Mm-hmm.
like our feet
Yep.
for many people, like they're getting us places. We're walking on
Yeah.
them, running on them, skipping, maybe. And like they just hold up our entire body weight. No
No big deal.
big deal. Um, and I don't know, sometimes I feel like they could use a little bath, a little salt bath, or like a foot rub or something like that. Like I feel like they just carry so much energy and it like grounds us into the world. I don't know. I don't know. I was just thinking about that. I haven't done it. I haven't taken a foot bath in like 4 years, but it feels like maybe it's time to do that. But yeah,
They're
that was
great. That's a good idea. That's a good point.
okay. Everything that you were saying about relationships, I love it. I love it. Okay, I will get into the tarot. The tarot deck that I use this time is called Capua Tarot. It was created by JL Umipig. And of course, it's going to be linked. We'll have her Instagram tagged in the show notes. I chose this deck because of the concept of Capua. So, this is information that I took from an article called On Not Losing Capua in Translation by BJ Gonzalvo, also going to be linked. And I'm just going to kind of paraphrase what they said. They said, according to Virgilio Enriquez, founder of Filipino psychology, Capua is the core concept of Filipino psychology, integrative of the self and the other. So Filipino scholars have translated this as like a shared inner self or shared identity, or just like your interconnectedness to other people. Ka is a prefix in Tagalog that denotes a relationship to another person. So, like, ka patid is like a brother or a sister. And then the second half of it is pwa or puang, and that means space. So, shared space in many ways. And we're just, we're one. We're just like very interconnected. Um, and we share this space, we share this world, we share this home, we share this struggle, or all of those things. So I love this deck. And for me personally, it has been a really pivotal way for me to connect with my Filipino ancestors who I feel very disconnected to all the time. So this one has a lot of like indigenous Filipino imagery. If you are Filipino, if you're in the diaspora, check it out. Um, okay, everything that you were saying, Shroot, reminds me of this first card that I pulled, very much in line. Oh, okay. I'm gonna try to say this in Tagalog. Tagalog has a lot of letters, y'all. I don't know if you're familiar. There's so many letters, so many syllables. Um, but I'm gonna try. This first one, I'll hold it up. Okay, cool. It is nakatatanda ang balaibo ang ibon, which means elder of bird feathers. And it would translate to the Queen of Swords. Um, just a little description. The image is an elder with a feathered headdress. She's smoking a pipe, and the smoke is releasing like this image of a bird that's flying or ascending. Um, her palm is open to receive, and she's also giving to the sky their breath. I don't know. It's a calm, serene image, and it's cute, and I love it. And I think this made me think a lot of my ex-boyfriend's mom, who was a really important like mentor, older adult, not older adult, but she's older than me and she's an adult. um and I remember just one time, I don't know what I was going through, but she told me that she would channel her older self, like her elder self. um the kind of version of her where she's wise, she's been through it, she's seen it all, she's seen enough, and she's not getting swept up by all the little things that me as a person in my 20s, just I was thinking that the entire world was ending or my entire world was ending. And I was young, still building a foundation, But my older self, my wiser self, that foundation has been there for a minute. I don't have to shake, I don't have to be all turbulent and whatnot. Um, and so I think about, we talk about channeling our inner child or our inner teenager, and that's great. They're a great time sometimes. But sometimes I need someone to hold me. I need to be held. Um, so it's this, I guess, feeling of being held by yourself. But you in the future, you that has seen it all again, like everything that I'm going through and will ever go through, she's already done it. And she knows the answers, and she knows, honestly, it wasn't that serious. Or maybe it was, and you survived anyway. You changed anyway. You grew anyway. Um, so I feel like this card is telling us to kind of channel that feeling or this version of us. We get to tell them every little thing. Oops, I guess that is going through our mind, our racing thoughts, our questions, this fear of uncertainty, this need to control. Yeah, she's wise, calm, and clear, which is so needed because, Shroot, as you were saying, we got some decisions to make about the relationships that we have in our lives and the things that we do in our lives. And this is not the time to be led by our heart and our emotions. This is a time for logic and rationality. I have to know her now. I know before I said rationality, don't know her. I know her now, especially as this older version of me, this older version of you. So, whatever you're going through right now, let your heart rest. Let it take the back seat. Let it go take a nap. You know, your mind and your logic, your rationale, that is what needs to be making the decisions right now. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we need that balance of the head and the heart. Um, yeah, the logic, the things that make sense need to be guiding your decisions moving forward. Let yourself think about whatever situation you're in and allow yourself to see it for what it really is. You might not like what you see, and that's kind of the point. Like, you're not supposed to, or not that you're not supposed to, but if you don't like it, you don't like it at its core, it's not in alignment with you and what you want, you get to change it. You get to accept that, acknowledge it, accept it, do something different, make a decision for yourself. And I feel like this is so funny because it's also Libra season and we're not the most known for making a decision. And I think partially it's because we're taking in all of the potential outcomes, all of the details. We're trying to make a balanced, informed decision. Just make a decision. Just do it. Note to self, just make a decision. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you're going to survive anyway. Yeah, be honest with yourself. And I want to say, as you're making this decision or these decisions, do it from a place of knowing things are going to work out. Because this older version of you, she already knows. She already knows, or they already know. He already knows. I feel like us right now, if we're operating from us, like our present place, we might operate from a place of fear that things won't work out the way that we want them to, or that like we can't control. And all of these things, we cannot do it from this place. We got to do it from that place of knowing that I lived through it, I survived, it worked out. This is not even on my mind anymore as an 88-year-old person. Like, I'm thinking about something else. I'm thinking about iced coffee, probably. garlic bread. I hope so. Yeah, I'm gonna, yeah, I'll leave that there. I hope that made sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna talk about it in our audience question episode next time. But that was exactly what I was gonna mention is that we can be calling in ourselves as an ancestor, and that past and future versions of us are our ancestors. And so, yeah, this is a powerful month to call that in. And I love it's been a thing since I was a kid. I have a very clear image of me in my elder years, sitting against like a willow tree or a banyan tree and just being surrounded by this like multi-generational community around me. And I used to get freaked out because I thought it was my like I was gonna birth all these people or whatever. And I've always been very like, it's not happening out of my uterus, thank you. But as I've gotten older, I understand it to be the community that I built, and especially through Shrew Trees now, I understand it. Yeah, it is this multi-generational community that I'm trying to cultivate, like that I'm just surrounded by this community, and I'm just like this cheeky old person who's just like, I don't give a fuck. And that calmness, that serenity that you're talking about, that you can call in, that like, yeah, there is a version of you who's old and survived it all, you know? So anything that you're going through right now, there is a version of you that survived it. And even if we call in, this is the perfect episode to name, like, let's say you didn't survive it, right? You're an ancestor. You are somebody we're calling in on a day of remembrance, like you still do live on. You just don't maybe live on in this human form, but you know, there is always an on, like, so you don't have to fear, um, I can't do it, I'm not gonna survive it. It's like a version of you will always survive. And so calling in whichever iteration of that version of you that survived it, that feels right is really powerful. So I love that.
Yeah, thanks for naming that. Every time I say you survive, I'm manifesting a survival for y'all.
Yep.
But again, things are just out of our hands. I don't know. There's no way to know. But we do know that there are timelines where we do survive and we do move on. But our heart will go on either way.
Near and far, wherever you are.
I used to sing that as a child
Yeah, it's a banger.
on the magic mic as a
Nice.
like old. I was just singing.
Hell yeah.
I love how just the cards presented themselves for this episode. The next card, I'm gonna hold it up. Um, it's the death card in like God, I don't know if it's Tagalog. Sometimes it's a mix of Ilocano, Tagalog, different dialects, but this card is called Kamatayan, and it is a representative of the Sulod trio, which are three brothers. Y'all, I cannot say these names. But okay, first, just like the major themes in this card are like acceptance of our mortality, acceptance of loss, acceptance that life, death, it ebbs and flows. Okay, these Sulod brothers are the keepers of the journey to our death. And I think after our death, I'm going to read specifically what JL had written because I can't, I can't paraphrase this. It would be a disservice. So each brother ushers us in a part of this path we walk on that leads us right back to where we began with the divine. They ask you to pay homage, I never know how to,
Homage. Yeah.
yeah, that one, to your journey at whatever point it is you are experiencing death in your living. Oh my God. Manganghao, I'm going to say that. Watches before the soul is born, before we are even conceived in the womb of our mothers or our fathers or our parent, our birthing parent. Um, Manglegas, sorry, bro, ushers us into life. And then Patagais, Makes agreements. This is part of connecting with your ancestors, y'all. Stumbling over words you can't pronounce or names you can't pronounce. Anyway, that brother makes agreements with the soul of the newborn about the way they will live and die. Their message to us is that death is always with us, that the guidance towards death begins before we are even conceived. To which I must ask y'all, and I know I've said it before, what is your understanding of death? Like, what is your relationship with death? Is it a complete end? Is it something you dread? Is it something that you embrace? Is it just a portal or transition to whatever's next? Um, these brothers, to them, death isn't the end. It's an important part of our journey as a living person. It's the period at the end of our story. It's the North Star that guides us. There are dogs fighting outside. Can you hear that?
I did a little bit, but it was just like banging.
It is a little terrifying sometimes.
Oh no.
That's okay.
Classic Long Beach.
Literally in my little apartment complex where the dogs are huge. They are huge. There's a Great Dane.
Oh.
Don't know what he's doing there, but oh well. um okay, yeah. Death is the North Star that guides us if we let it. It's loss, it's grief, it's change. But it is an important reminder for us that everything is impermanent. Nothing, like everything changes. The only constant in life is change. And it gives us an opportunity to remember what once was, the impact it had on our lives, and the lessons we learned, and our experiences of joy and sorrow and everything beyond and in between. Um, I'm going to quote JL again just because I think it's so important. It says, many times we move through this life fearing death, when it is death that truly roots us in this living. Death awakens us to the need for new life to be lived, for new life to contribute to what has already been created. We live in acceptance in our life, but in order to truly do this, we need to accept that death ushered us in. Wait, hold on. My vision's blurring. We live in acceptance of life, but in order to truly do this, we need to accept that death ushered us in as much as it ushers us out. Oh, banger.
Yeah.
With death comes renewal, transformation, transition, and deep change that was awaiting you, that was waiting for you to unfold its necessity and truth. So the Sulod brothers are encouraging us to recognize and honor that death is always with you. Yeah, we say the veil is thin, but does the veil even exist sometimes? You're not separated from death until it's your time. To die is a universal experience and a universal truth. It's not something to avoid or to dismiss. There's so much beauty in loss, and there's so much important lessons and experiences that come with letting go and allowing things to work out just the way they need to. And yeah, in the next episode, I'm going to talk more about ways to build a relationship with death and dying because that's my jam and I love that. But we don't have time today. So I will pass this on to Shroot.
Yeah. Ooh. Wow. I'm so moved by that. I think it really summed up so much of what we talked about in this episode really nicely. So I'm like, I don't know that I have anything to add. I had thoughts, but then everything you said, I was like, ooh, wow. Like, and my thoughts went out the window. So I think I'll just leave that there. I'm with you. That was amazing. I would like run that back, to be honest. If you're listening, like listen to
Yeah.
that again. Like really take that in because I think so much was said there. And it's so, oh, the thing I wanted to say. Grief is a portal. Loss is a portal. And it ushers us into something new. I think a lot about how there are people who experience um death of loved ones, or this was a case of somebody who was estranged from their parent, had not been raised by their parent at all, had no connection to them. And in the passing of that parent, um, that person had a latent chronic illness that had never bothered them in their lives, and then the passing of their parent, who they were estranged from, uh, kickstarted the chronic illness. And that's the case for a lot of people. Is that, like, stuff that is latent, stuff that has never been relevant to you at all. Um, you experience a heavy loss, and it gets kicked up, and or, death can be a portal to something new, or, a resolution of, oh, in honor of this person that I loved, I'm going to live like this. So I had that happen where a really, really close friend of mine passed away in, like, infection complications. She had been a cancer survivor for many years, and she's just, her immune system couldn't fight off an infection, and she passed away in 2020 or 2021. I can't remember off the top of my head, which is, I'll be existential about it when we log off. But um and I experienced that loss alone. I was living alone in Houston, and I wasn't surrounded by anybody who knew her. And I was, again, another loss that I had to grieve on my own. And I this one felt more real to me than my grandparents did, because I had been close with her and we had lived a life here in America that was really tangible to me. She's the one I credit to um, carrying me through my chronic illness and teaching me how to be disabled and still find joy in life. And she is not a spiritual person. She does not. She's a psychology major. She was like, astrology is the Barnum effect. Like, we did not see eye to eye on that. And I know that I cannot reach for spiritual tools to connect with her. I know that that's not in alignment with who she is and what she would want. It doesn't feel right to do that. So the way that I choose to connect with her and honor her is that I get my head really stuck in the past or in the future. It's hard for me to stay present, but she was so present for her life. I mean, she really lived her life. And um I try to suck the marrow out of each moment in honor of her, because she taught me how to do that, regardless of whether I was able to do things because of my body or not. And we're able to carry on, the memories of those we lost, through how we choose to live our lives. And so I think that I hadn't really consciously made that choice to live that way. I had maybe passively made that choice, but it turned into something very conscious and something very visceral that feels very alive to me. And it feels like almost like a fire that I have to tend to keep it alive, that I have to keep opting into choosing to live my life in the present moment, to suck the marrow out of each moment. And so, um, that was, like, I wanted to give an example of, like, grief as a portal into a new way of being that can be positive, or that can be transformative in it, and not just like, oh, you're sick now. Like, I wanted to give kind of two sides of that coin, of that, yeah, grief will change you, and to be embrace it, to be open to it, to let go of that idea that you can control how grief affects you, or that you can experience loss at all. It's inevitable. And I love that card. I'm gonna go re-listen to that myself. There's so much there.
Heck yeah. Shout out to your friend.
Yeah. R.I.P. Xandra, love you.
Mhm.
She was a UCSC alum.
Banana slugs.
Yeah, she was a slug. She was real proud of it too.
Mhm.
Anyway,
Sammy the slug. For those who are not
listening.
watching, yeah, I just put up, I don't even know how to say this, but like a little hand puppet.
Yeah, when you, like, close your middle two fingers and your thumb and stick out your index and pinky, and that's a
Yeah,
slug.
antennas.
Mm,
Sammy,
maybe.
Samantha the slug. That's not his name, but it could be.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that in, pal. I think that's so important, and just another perspective on how we can still connect and honor our ancestors. It doesn't have to be through a spiritual way. It could just be by embodying the way they approached life. And I resonate with that deeply. My sister, anytime I pull cards that like connect with her, It's just like, be happy, stop it. Like, just not move on, but like,
Live.
on a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, live. Don't be sad and
Hmm.
don't live in that. And I think, I mean, that was definitely reflected in our time together. Like, she's 10 years older than I am, so I was a crying child all the time, but she was always just holding me and being like, it's okay. It's okay. And I try to approach life in that way of just being like, I have a choice to be sad. I have a choice to be depressed and like just sit in this icky feeling, or I can do something else. Like, do something else. I think someone knocked on my door.
Oh, you want to go check?
No, no, no,
Okay.
no. I'll just use that as confirmation that I just need to do something else.
Yeah.
I need to,
Mood.
I need to be happy. I need to be kind and really just enjoy what this life is. Oh, hold on. Is that my spouse?
Go ahead.
BRB.
Mhm.
No, it was just my neighbor going into their house. Hi, Nina.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Be happy, y'all. Or not. The choice is yours to some degree. Okay. You ready for the last one? Or
Let's do it. Mm,
anything that you want to say? Anything
no,
more? No, you
yeah.
already said
Yeah.
everything.
I said it.
That's how you know it's the third card.
I know.
Transition into the third card. Okay. This brings us into our third card. I'm going to pull it up.
Ooh.
There's so much going on with this, y'all. Okay. The card is Sham ang Balat, and that is the nine of shells. A little description of the card. It's a person who maybe they're naked. I can't really tell. I can't tell if they're like above the clouds, but anyway, they're like one, two, three, four, five, six. It just looks like there's a lot of arms on them, on their head, on their shoulders, on their sides. And then they're kind of surrounded by like a lot of bats that are hanging upside down. So cute. I love them so much. Oh, maybe it's the ocean. That would make sense because it's shells. Yeah. Some notes from the creator were that like bats are the symbol of rebirth and of being awake despite the darkness. Ooh, okay, bats. I love that. As the person exits the cave, oh, are they in a cave? Okay. They are greeted with waters of the sky that mix with their own. Okay, that's why I was, maybe I do understand art, y'all. Maybe I do. Eyes are closed and they feel the fullness of the waters above and around them. The darkness is left behind, but not in a rush. The clouds in the sky are reflecting the waters. There is peace in this place where water embraces this being. Aww, I love that. Um, this card is really just grounding into gratitude. Yeah, living in gratitude, inviting in abundance, and allowing yourself to be held by, I don't know, the goodness that life has to offer, being held in love, in community and connection. If not by like others, then nature, your dreams, yourself, your bed, your pets, all of these things. Um, what are you thankful for? What did you work your butt off in order to get that's finally here? You know the meme where it's like me at the job that I prayed for, and it's like them being all
Yep.
depressed. Um, Even in the shittest situations, there are some things that you can be grateful for. And that's not to negate the real stress and challenges and hardship of whatever life situation you're in right now. But there are still things. It's that balance of good and bad and joy and sorrow. So, in the places that you're feeling, especially kind of icky about, can you find glimpses of joy, glimpses of gratitude, just kind of things to hold on to and appreciate? without letting it be overshadowed by all the other stuff that comes with it. Yeah, it's fall, y'all. Oh, hey. It's a time of harvesting the fruits of your labor, or whatever those sayings are. So really enjoy the gifts that you worked hard to give yourself. Um, it's kind of a product of the dedication that you demonstrated to yourself, to your healing, to the life that you're creating. Um, don't focus on how long this good stuff is gonna last. Ooh, like let yourself fully enjoy what you have right now without tampering with it, with all of your thoughts about, well, is this real? Is this as good as it's going to get? Or is this going to be taken away from me? Or am I going to lose this? All valid questions, all valid thoughts, but really unhelpful. So stop it. Just like my sister said, just stop it. Even though she didn't like say that directly to me in this lifetime, I know she wanted to, but she gets to as an ancestor. So I bring that to you. Stop it. Just stop. Just let yourself have this. Let yourself enjoy it. Let yourself experience it and let it go when it's time to go. Things aren't meant to last forever. Things are meant to be changed. Things are meant to move. And with that movement and with that change, new things come in, new things to make you happy, new things to make you feel joy and connectedness and all of those things. So continue embracing the unknown, continue embracing that things are going to change. Live in the moment, be with it, be present with it without trying to control it, without trying to make it stay. Remember that things that challenge you are portals, just like grief, just like death, just like life. They're portals to answers, to healing, to change, to goodness, to just whatever's next. So practice gratitude, practice being present, and practice letting go. That's it.
Ooh, fire. Um, what came up for me was that Venus is spending most of this Libra's, and Venus is the ruler of Libra, to be clear. I haven't said that enough this episode, but it's spending most of its time in Scorpio this Libra season, and this week it will be entering Sagittarius. And I think that this card embodies the transition between that so beautifully. So I know I talked about it earlier, but just, you know, Venus and Scorpio is all about endings. It's all about waiting for the shoe to drop. Me and Stevie know that all too well with Scorpio Venus is we're always waiting for the shoe to drop. And I was thinking about it this week myself of like, I can tell that my relationships are changing because I'm changing, you know, like, of course, I'm growing, I'm changing. Of course, my relationships are going to change as well. And I can see that my loved ones and I are entering new phases of our life, of course. We're 30, you know, like it makes sense. But my Scorpio Venus in me is terrified. And I am finding myself grasping for straws at how to keep things the same. I'm finding myself being like, okay, well, if I just did this, maybe then it would stay the same, and da 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 da. And I have done this before very passively in the past without realizing. And this was the first time where I was like, wait a minute. Of course, relationships are supposed to change. Of course, I'm growing. I'm not even the same. Of course, how could my relationships be the same? And I gave myself kind of a little bit of presence and awareness of like, hey, you're doing this thing that you always do. And like, do you really need to do that right now? Like, is that even really relevant to what's going on right now? You're kind of trying to swim upstream here. And what if you just floated instead? And so kind of set the intention of like, I just need to be here in this transition. And I suck at transitions. I find them very uncomfortable, very dysregulating. And it's like, I'm not going to be here forever. And there is stuff that I can appreciate in this moment. You know, I'm happy for me and my friends and all the ways in which we're changing. Like it is something to celebrate. It's something to be present for. It's not something to live in fear of. And so I'm committing to that myself. And I think that that is like that fear of change into fuck it, we ball, we got to just do it anyway, like be there anyway. That Sagittarius, that Scorpio to Sagittarius transition is just perfectly embodied with this idea. And so as we kind of move into Venus and Sagittarius, and we have Venus and Sagittarius for the beginning of Scorpio season, really try to hold on to um keep it moving and really hold on to, the only constant in life is change. And I just want to end with, I think that life can get so hard and we can get really bogged down in all of the muck of just the awfulness of being alive, whether that's our own personal experiences or, being bearing witness to what's going on in the world right now, like, or what our families have experienced, et cetera, et cetera. Like just being bogged down by the heaviness of life. Um, I think we can forget the value of being alive as a human being. And so I just want to kind of remind that, like, the value of being alive as a human being is that we can change. Because if you look at every single ghost story, if you look at every single kind of supernatural entity that is like was human, isn't human anymore, like any of the stories across any culture that talks about this stuff, the biggest plot line surrounding those stories is that the entity that is no longer human has like unresolved business that they didn't resolve when they were alive, and then they're pressed about it in the afterlife because they can't do anything about it. And it's like the beauty of being in this electrified meat sack that we call being a human is that we have the power to change. We have the power to grow and to steer the direction of that change. And that's not something that any other um, entity has, like, in the level that we do. That's what makes it special to be human. And so I really encourage you, take advantage of this power, this magic that you have as a human being, and really embrace the fact that, yeah, you can change and you can choose how you change in response to the things that you can't choose. So, to really meet these changes that are incoming in your relationships or changes that are incoming in your life or just in the world around us as things change very dynamically, really meet that with I'm here, I'm in this, and I can change too. And that's the beauty of being alive as a human being. That's my superpower, and I'm going to own that. So, we'll end there. Any thoughts, Stevie?
No, I love it. I love it all.
Yay.
It's always so fun.
Well, thank you for rocking with us, y'all. I do want to leave you with a little sneak peeky surprise for our, listeners who rock with us to the end, us yapping way over time. We try to do an hour, we never really succeed. Um, we want to give you a little thank you. We have a giveaway coming soon, and it will only be announced and conducted via our podcast. So we will not be sharing it on social media. So um, stay tuned for that. You'll start seeing the info around that roll down the pipeline in the upcoming episodes. But we wanted to offer a thank you as we approach our 6 month anniversary of this podcast. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening all over the world. You're eligible for our giveaway. So um, stay tuned. And where can we find you, Stevie?
Ooh, you can find me in the cryptic symbolism of your dreams and also on Instagram and TikTok at cosmic.return.
Love it. I'm just here, man. You can find me on the internet. Like, don't go looking for me in your dreams. But I am at Shrew Trees. That's SHRUTREES on pretty much every single social media platform out there. So go ahead and find us. You can also follow and definitely interact with the Bleeding Hearts Club .pod Instagram account. We also have a TikTok account, by the way. We've made that. So you can also find and follow us on TikTok. It's Bleeding Hearts Club .pod everywhere. So yeah, we love chatting with you. Feel free to email us. If you are interested in some guidance around any of the topics that we've talked about in this podcast so far, if anything stuck out to you that you want to know how it affects you personally, we do offer a joint tarot and astrology reading called Dance with Datura, where we hold space for you to bloom even in the dark, and we help you wield your shadow in ways that empower you to transform in the ways that you choose to. So, We are very detailed in those readings. They are very, very useful, lifelong resources. We really encourage you to check that out. And you can find the links to all of these things in our show notes. And we'll see you back for Ancestors Part 2 in 2 weeks.
Bye, y'all. See you next Tuesday.
Love you.
Love you.